These are the 5 names, like I mentioned earlier, that I think are guys who will have the most snaps in 2026. So, uh, we're gonna start at number 5 and work our way up to number 1. I've got 3 defensive guys. This is actually going to be our one and only offensive guy, and we'll kick it off at number 5. Wide receiver DeQuane Provo. I've got his stars next to him, so he's a consensus 3-star prospect out of Bentonville, Arkansas. 5'10", 160, so he's a real small player. 35 catches, 713 yards, and 10 touchdowns, around 20 yards per catch this past season. He's ranked fourth, fifth, and sixth according to Rivals, 24/7 Sports, and ESPN in the state of Arkansas. And then he's around in the 60s, depending on what recruiting service you look at wide receiver position. So we talked about right Jude Hall, a guy who was committed to Memphis originally. He was around 129 according to ESPN. Dwayne Provo about half that. He's a top 60 guy. So number 60 according to Rivals, 63 to 24/7. So in that early 60 range, just pretty good. He also played basketball in track and field in high school, which is a background you like to see as well. So he's a guy 5'10", 160. The reason I put him on this list is because a lot of the guys that we got transferred in, Donovan Fapel, Chris Marshall, some of the guys that were already on this team, Jalen Brown, CJ Brown. These are guys that have a little bit more meat on the bone. They're guys that could play outside. They're guys that are going to be dominating on outside routes. And DeQuane Provo, a smaller player, I think a lot of these speedsters, a lot of these guys that are smaller, I think they have a quicker shot to get in the room and to find some impact playing time. Does that mean it's this guy? Maybe not. Maybe it's a different player. But Provo was one of our higher ranked players according to most services. Like I said, he's fourth in Rivals in the state of Arkansas. He's probably a top 5 prospect in our recruiting class for this upcoming season. So ultimately, I decided to put just a talented guy on this list. And I think at receiver, where there's a lot of names, you can find a lot of different players playing. I think this is a guy that could find himself on the field pretty early. Bentonville, a team that made it to the 7A state championship here in Arkansas. I think he's a really talented player, and I think that's why I wanted to put him at number 5. And he's, like I mentioned, the only offensive guy I have on this list. So most of the talent and most of the players that I think are going to play this upcoming season will be on the defensive side of the ball. And we'll skip over now to number 4 and talk about a guy who could be a trench player for us this upcoming season. And that's defensive tackle Anthony Kennedy Jr. An awesome name about this. Awesome thing about this guy on this list is the fact that Silverfield flipped him from Miami right when he got here. So a couple of these guys on this list, he was able to flip. And so for Anthony Kennedy Jr., a guy to not even be in our class a couple months ago, Silverfield brings him in. That's a big get. A guy in-state player out of Little Rock Central, about 6'5". Some services him at 300, some have him at 330. So that's what I have him listed at, 6'5", 330. This past season was a pretty impressive season for him. So 61 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 14 pressures. According to 24/7 Sports, he's the number 4 player in the state of Arkansas. And then according to ESPN, he's number 31 defensive tackle in the entire country. So he also played basketball and track and field, which thinking about this guy playing basketball is kind of crazy. At 6'5", 330 pounds, that's a center you would not want to have to deal with. So a guy that produced a lot of tackles this past season and 18 tackles for loss is crazy, even for high school. But he's a guy. This room was so depleted last year. You talk about David Oke, who's going to be back. Danny Saley, those in the portal. Cameron Balls now graduated. Keyshawn Blackstock's graduated. A lot of these guys were either hurt or are gone. And there's so many names. Like so many of the guys who didn't find themselves on the field last year, they are back. But I think just kind of given that was the fact. Reginald Vaughn, I know, is back. Kevin Otis was a guy who came in last year and now is transferred to Kansas. This new recruiting class of defensive tackles, I think, could actually surpass a lot of the guys from last year's. And if that's the case, I mean, you could be the backup defensive tackle. So we don't have a ton of guys now that Cam Ball's gone and Ian Jeffrard is gone. We don't have a lot of guys playing that big, bulky position, just space eaters, guys that can really dominate in the defensive run game. And Anthony Kennedy Jr. is a guy at 330. If that's the case, man, even as a true freshman, I think he could find himself maybe as our backup nose tackle. And we'll see if he's a guy that really can contribute early, because I think that there's a shot at that, and so I'm excited to see what he can do for this team. But I've got him here at number 4, and we're going to switch over now to number 3. This is Colton Yarbrough. So 6'5", 242 pounds, 3-star prospect out of Oklahoma. He's ranked number 5 according to 24/7 and ESPN. The number 5 prospect in the state of Oklahoma, and the number 40 edge rusher, according to 24/7 in the country. Also, a guy who's played track and field. I think a pretty good athlete as well. Oklahoma's got him on this Super 30 list, which I'm not 100% sure what that is, but he's number 5 on that list, which has got to be good. 45 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 4 pressures. I was kind of reading a little bit about him in his bio on 24/7, and the guy who was writing in there would talk about how raw of a player this guy is. This is a guy who I think is kind of become more of a name in our class. Probably borderline top 5 player in the class, but I think it's the opportunity and the development that I think could get him on the field. Oklahoma, I think, has done a very good job for some Razorbacks and in developing good players, and I think he could be another name on here. Uh, a guy who on 24/7 he's listed 6'5", 210, and then on ESPN or 24/7, I think he's got him at 6'5", 242. Rivals has got him at 6'5", 210. So many different numbers. I think on Arkansas's National Signing Day graphic, they had him at 250 something. So I don't know where this dude's at, but I'm excited to see him play. I think Quincy Rhodes Jr., like I've mentioned, him and Charlie Collins, and really Rhodes only, is the dude who's going to be playing. And like everyone else, their job is unsafe. And so I think that means a guy like Colton Yarbrough, as a true freshman, could come in and take some positions, because I think he's a dude that will. He's got great size. I think raw athleticism, a good athlete, and so I think he's going to come in and really stand out. And I wouldn't be surprised, maybe in that back half of the season, if he's the guy that could get a couple sacks for us this year. So that's number 3. Number 2, probably the least sexiest pick that you could put on here, but it's a punter, and that's that number 2 punter, Connor Smith. And he's a 3-star prospect, and that's only according to certain recruiting services, because some services don't even have this guy existing. But I was reading his National Signing Day graphic and kind of the things they put about him. A 5-star prospect, according to Cole's Kicking, which is, I think, a punting and kicking service, and then the number 9 ranked punter, according to Cole's Kicking. So he's a guy. It's really contingent on it, like if he wins this job, and that's not all the way certain yet. I know we have other guys in the room, but Devin Bale is gone, and that's like obviously the biggest competition he could have had, and so for him to be gone, that I think really like affects things. The other punters we have on our roster, Gavin Rush, a redshirt freshman at 6'3", 207. He didn't really play at all last year. Like I said, it was Bale, but I put him here at number 2 because if he beats out Gavin Rush, then he's the starting punter. So I think that if you're the starting punter, you're out there every time we punt, which this past season was a ton. Then you're probably going to be one of our freshman leaders in snaps. So I didn't like that I put him here at 2, and the fact that it kind of, you're wanting to see the highlight names, your edge rushers, your offensive linemen, your skill position players, Hank Hendricks at quarterback. It's not the case. I mean, Connor Smith, I'm just being realistic, is a guy who probably will play for us. Kind of like if I would have used Scott Starzik in our top 3 last year, because as a kicker, he was out there a lot, and it was a true freshman. So Connor Smith, the same way, 6'3", 180, out of Ridgeview, which I believe is in Virginia. He's a guy I think could be a big contributor for us this upcoming season. And then at number 1, I think this is probably the least anticipated pick, because I think a lot of people would have agreed with me on this, but it's defensive tackle Danny Beal III, the true consensus 4-star prospect, the only guy I saw as a 4-star prospect on every single service. 35 tackles last year, 3 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, 6 hurries, even 2 pass breakups and a pick. He's the number 108 overall prospect according to ESPN. That's not in the state of Arkansas. That's not just at his position. That is out of every player in every position in the country. Number 1 prospect in Arkansas according to every major service. Number 7 defensive tackle according to ESPN. He also played basketball and track and field, and just like Kennedy, he also plays defensive tackle, but he was able to be committed by Silverfield. So Danny Beal III, a guy who was committed to Oklahoma State originally, decommitted, and then when Silverfield was hired, decided to flip his commitment to the Arkansas Razorbacks. So He's a guy at 6'5", 320. I've seen even 6'3", 300. So my bet around 6'4", 310, 315. He's a guy who I think could also be similar to Kennedy, where he's going to get an opportunity to play right away, and it's because a lot of the depth here is gone, and there's a lot of young guys, and a four-star prospect with his caliber of play, even at a lower level. He played at Cross County, which I believe is a 2A school in Arkansas, could be 3, but smaller school. I think defensive tackle Danny Bill III, he's just the best name in our class, which I think gives me the most hope that he could play. Uh, but maybe it's a Tavion Wallace situation, right? Where Wallace didn't really get the opportunity to play too much despite being our number one recruit in last year's class. But I do think this position allows for a little more opportunity, and I think Beal's going to take it. He could be our nose, starting alongside a guy like David Oke. There's a lot of young guys that are coming out of the portal. There's Hunter Osborne, there's Carlin Jones, but even Exadavian Sims from Oregon and Trajan Odoms from Ohio State. These are both guys that are so young, and they're going to be guys that are probably similar caliber of players as Danny Beal III. But the size on this guy is just different than a lot of those players. A lot of those guys are in the 290s, low 300s. And Beal listed at 320. If he's that size and can get even bigger, at the University of Arkansas, I think he's in a spot where he could be that nose guy, and he could be the starting nose. So I'm intrigued to see throughout the spring season what Silverfield thinks of him, what our defensive coordinator Roberts thinks of him. And he's a guy I wouldn't be surprised if you see his name throughout spring practices and throughout the summer, and his name listed early on the depth chart. So I'm excited to see what Danny Bill III can do for us this upcoming season. It's our top recruit. So that's my number one player. We can run through it real fast just to give you the names 5-1. Number 5, DeQuane Provo, the receiver out of Bentonville. Number 4, the defensive tackle, Anthony Kennedy Jr. out of Little Rock. 3, edge rusher, Colton Yarborough out of Durant, Oklahoma. Number 2, punter, Connor Smith out of Ridgeview, Virginia. And then at number 1, defensive tackle, Danny Beal III, Cross County, Arkansas. So 3 of those guys coming from the state of Arkansas, which is awesome. Like I mentioned, 9 in-state prospects, which is huge, and Silverfield was a big part of getting a lot of those guys. So